Hi, hello everyone, it's me, Deadbedspread. And since the dawn of time, people have taken great joy in combining two unassuming Pokemon by just absolutely smashing them together in the worst way possible. We've all seen Pokemon fusions, Don, Mr. Pedo,
Hitler.
Long ago, before such fusion sites even existed, a friend approached me on the playground telling me of their new idea, a Golem Electabuzz hybrid. Golabuzz. This was like 2 decades ago. Kid was a goddamn prodigy.
Not to mention that fusions have been around since the beginning of time. I mean, what kid doesn't come home from their first trip to the zoo and start drawing pictures of every animal that they saw but mashed together into one hideous abomination? Applying the concept of Pokemon was only natural.
Outside of Kyurem, Necrozma, and Calyrex, no in-game Pokemon are capable of fusion. That we know of. Combining Pokemon is always popping up online, and it's a great art challenge for sure, but what if it were somewhat possible in-game? What if there was an already existing set of boundaries within the games that would allow us to fuse, to merge two existing Pokemon species into one? Not just a Poliwrath with Mr. Mime's face, but a brand new Pokemon species. That, my friends, is what fellow YouTuber Neckpunch and I aim to answer today.
What's cracking YouTube? Neckpunch here. One way to do fusions would be common ancestors.
We can do that on your channel. I feel that the next step isn't to keep looking to the past, but rather go in the opposite direction. Look to the future. Wait, past and future Pokemon. Huh. Would you look at that?
Talk about good timing. I'm sorry, what were we talking about?
Something about the past, something about the future. Crossbreeding! I mean, it already exists in real life. Just look at mules, ligers, growlers, Tigons, Pisleys, Zedonks, Walpins, and the human Z.
Dr. Seuss called.
Theoretically, would it really be a stretch to leave two different Pokemon at the daycare to end up hatching an entirely new species? I mean, if you can leave a Skitty and a Wailord to get it on, anything is possible. How exactly? Well, let me explain. Pokemon, not that the games would ever tell you, are divided into 15 egg groups. Monster human like Field Grass, Water 1, Water 2, Water 3, Flying Bug, Dragon, Fairy, Mineral, Amorphous Ditto, and no eggs discovered. Each Pokemon can have up to 2 egg groups. If 2 Pokemon have 1 matching egg group, congratulations, they can breed. Skitty and Wailord are both within field, so... This applies to all egg groups, except no eggs discovered, which is usually the egg group for legendaries, and with some odd exceptions. Some of the most powerful beings in existence, but yet they can't get any. Shame.
I mean, maybe they just don't breed in the daycare because they prefer to do things a little more privately. Oh gosh, now I'm imagining some sort of post-game private back room where you can breed legendaries for extra Pokédollars. You were saying?
There also exist gender unknown Pokemon, which are not an egg group per se, but more so a fact of life, which can only breed with the Ditto egg group, which only contains, surprise, which is odd, as all of these Pokemon can only reproduce with Ditto, who it turns out itself cannot reproduce with Ditto, so how do egg in wild? Anyway, why are we covering this? Well, as the fundamental rule for crossbreeding, I decided that the paired Pokemon must share 2 matching egg groups with one another. This cuts out all of the gender unknown Pokemon, as well as Pokemon that are only within 1 egg group. If this were an in-game feature, I imagine one of the parents would need to hold a certain item when sent into the daycare. Something like an incense. Just in case you were actually just trying to do some regular breeding and ended up with this. I scoured through all the egg groups, sorted all of the Pokemon that fit the baseline criteria, and using this, we picked out some combinations that had the best potential. The first pairing that stood out to me were the Remoraid family and Relicanth, both sharing the Water 1 and Water 2 egg groups. Seemed like an easy blend. Both share similar typings. Both are fish. Sort of. But things really got going when I broke down the theming for each line. Relicanth is an ancient Pokemon that hasn't evolved for eons, and the Remoraid family is based off of weaponry, with Remoraid being a revolver and Octillery being a tank. The theming was obvious for this crossbreed. Ancient weaponry. Aramora adopts Relicanth's Rockhead and changes out Remoraid's firearm for the classic ranged weapon, the bow and arrow. If we were making this video prior to Gen 8, you bet this little guy would have been called Aracuda. Given Remoraide's drastic evolution into Octillery, there was no way that I couldn't reference such an iconic transformation. Need a way to shoot rocks at your enemies, but a bow and arrow simply won't do? Why not try a catapult? At level 35, Aramora will evolve into the fearsome yet lovable Rock-to-Roly. Its frontmost tentacles conglomerate dirt and rocks into large boulders, which it then holds using its next two set of tentacles, which curl up to resemble wheels, allowing this projectile-propelling cephalopod to roll around freely. Its rear tentacles will then gather said rocks, before chucking them with incredible force towards its opponents. If you were struggling in game to find the correct species to breed in order to create an Aramora, I feel that a fish evolving into an octopus would be a pretty big hint.
As for me, the first pairing that jumped out as I scanned the list were Scraggy and Silicobra. In case you can't tell, I have a bit of a soft spot for reptilian Pokemon, so this was kind of a no-brainer. So what happens when a lizard with big, baggy, shedskin pants crossbreeds with a snake who wears a hood full of sand? Sand Bully. Don't worry, it's only sand. This one kind of wrote itself. They already had pretty similar reptile bodies, and combining what made each one special resulted in big, baggy skin pants full of sand. It slithers around collecting sand, which then, combined with the moisture from its folds, turns into sand bundies it can fling. Remember when you and your mates were young enough to think throwing sand at each other was fun? You definitely weren't going to get sand in your eyes? Well, now that concept has made it into Pokemon. Or Fakemon. When Sand Bully reaches level 38, it really figures out how to weaponize its sand, and evolves into Glazidus. Or maybe this should be a Firestone evolution. Like Sandaconda, its body is uncomfortably long, but Glazidus has found a way to make that work, moving silently, sneaking in the shadows, leaping out to cut you and then disappearing. And no, it's not glass type. I'm not doing glass type.
I mean, sure, what are glass and rock if not just alterations of sand? We sure as hell ain't making a sharp type, that's for sure. These guys seem like real brats. I love them. I've had the idea for Pokemon crossbreeding for quite a while. I think a cool way of implementing it in-game would be to have an opposing trainer send out a Mon you've never seen before, and after defeating them, having optional dialogue that alludes to the daycare in some way. Give the player hints, you know? It's easy. One of the first Mons I imagined being used this way was a Mareep and Whismur fusion, both being in the Monster and Field egg groups. Initially, I had a rule where the Mons also needed to share the same number of evolutions. However, that did end up limiting some of the possibilities, so I dropped it. Going back to the basics, the Mareep line are sheep, the Whismur line are very loud. A loud sheep, I hear you say? Not quite. Our first stage, Bedlam, is a little tiny friend who's constantly rattled.
But Deadbedspread,
I hear you ask.
this doesn't look like a sheep at all.
Not yet it doesn't. Instead of initially resembling a sheep, Bedlam is unable to count sheep. It can't sleep. It's got insomnia as its ability, and it's not taking its sleep deprivation lightly, much akin to a baby crying at 2 AM. It is technically soundproof, in a way. They're so loud that no other sounds can be heard. However, some have been trained to perform alongside musical instruments at gigs. They are paired electric type, after all. At level 17, Bedlam will evolve into Dozadov, who's lost its insomnia ability and is finally able to drift off. Its large ears remain upright to alert it to any danger, and its overall body shape is built to mimic that of a Loudred, presumably for intimidation purposes. They might be floofy, but don't let their calm demeanor fool you. Those horns can pack quite a punch. Upon reaching level 35, Dozadov will reach Eternal Sleep by evolving into Sheepwalker, gaining the Comatose ability thanks to its youth of staying perpetually awake. A herd of Bedlam and Dozadov are usually protected by a solo Sheepwalker, constantly patrolling and monitoring their surroundings, despite being completely blind and soundproof to the outside world. Their behavior has baffled scientists in the Pokemon community, and research on their biology is difficult, as no sedative is powerful enough to prevent them from retaliating. I mean, how do you put something to sleep if it's already asleep? Some theorize that its horns act as lightning rods, storing the extra energy in its excess of wool. However, no evidence of this has ever been observed.
So, a Feruchemi Pokemon. Bedlam might be the best name I've ever heard. Altaria and Noivern are both dragon flying types. They're also both in the dragon and flying egg groups. One makes thunderous noise, the other is a fluffy cloud. So to me, they really felt like a match made in the heavens. However, I do enjoy the idea of fusions resulting in a type combo that's different to either parent, whereas crossing these two would just be another dragon flying type, right? Well, what if our new fluffy cloud dragon generated thunder the way actual clouds generate thunder? That is, by first generating lightning. Here are Lightling and Thundrake, dragon electric types that generate static electricity within their fluffy bodies, which, when released, causes a thunderous crash. I like the idea of it having an ability that causes all electric moves to do an additional 30 or 50% damage, but not to Pokemon with soundproof, or something like that. Or maybe they just have drizzle.
In all of my time theorizing, I never considered changing a crossbreed's typing entirely from its parents to fit a brand new theme. That is genius.
Why, thank you. And if you thought that was clever, you're bound to think my last crossbreed is super weird. See, I noticed that Sobble and Delibird shared 2 egg groups. There had to be something there. But a lizard crossed with a bird? A dinosaur? Dinosaurs are commonly thought of as lizards, yet are also understood to have evolved into birds. So, in a way, they're kind of like a retroactive bridge, at least visually. But what about concept? A secret agent crossed with Santa? Well, that put me in mind of Christmas James Bond movies, but they don't really stand out as particularly Christmas. And maybe you can see where I'm going with this. When it comes to Christmas action heroes, one really stands out above the rest, doesn't he? A Crestive, the die-hard Pokemon. It shoots rapid-fire water blasts from its fingertips and hose-like tail. Though it can't actually fly, it has been seen using its tail to swing from buildings and is unafraid to fall from tremendous heights. I really felt like a Crestive also needed a Pre-Evo, but what's the child version of Die Hard? Oh, right, Home Alone. So here's Decorade. Might have turned out a little more hysterical than the Kevin McAllister we remember, but what are you gonna do?
You know, it really makes me wonder what Kevin chose as his career path once he grew up. Anyway, for my final crossbreed, I was gonna do Skorupi and Wimpod, both Pokemon that I think are really cool. However, the two are very similar to begin with, so it would have just ended up being a really extreme bug, which Drapion and Gliscod already are anyway. So, I was then super excited to do Phalanx and Snorunt, but it turns out that Phalanx is genderless, meaning that it can't breed outside of Ditto. Damn it! Still, that would be a really cool fusion, but this is crossbreeding, baby. We've got rules. Falling into the same problem, I think Fiona and Marill would have been as equally hysterical.
Would they, though?
Yeah, of course they would.
Wouldn't they just look exactly the same? They're both just blue balls. Wait a minute.
I really struggled to find a final combination of Pokemon to use. I wanted to avoid using starters, as before the new regional forms in Legends Arceus, they generally tended to stick to their given evolutionary families, and most of the other combinations seemed rather dull or obvious. Except one. Remember Woobat, Gen 5's little heart-nosed happy friend? It's a bat, no surprise, and is part of the flying and field egg groups, which makes sense. It can fly, and the field egg group is filled up with majority mammals, which bats are. Well, it turns out that there is only just one other evolutionary family that shares those two egg groups with the Woobat line. That being Farfetch'd. A bat bird? I mean, both have wings, sure, but an avian mammalian hybrid? What kind of cursed creature are they creating within the daycare walls? One of a kind. Bizarre is a banana bat, in both the figurative and the literal sense. I mean, one of its parents was attached to a vegetable. It had to find the next best thing. Constantly anxious due to its cursed existence, it wields its bafflingly big banana like a blunderbuss, ready to blast away anyone who gets too close with a powerful pummeling of potassium. I imagine it having an ability similar to Gult Missile, but instead it reloads its nana every second turn. Maybe if it were to land the defeating blow on a few enemies using its ability rather than attacking directly, it would be able to evolve into Bananas, a newfound master of disaster who's one bad day away from unleashing a Bananarama Slamma-Jamma.
Okay, relax.
I'm sorry. Now a dual-wielding powerhouse lost to their own mind, Bananas is a true force to be reckoned with. Would it be too outlandish for its ability to be like a double Gulp Missile, where the retaliation hits for double damage? Or it could do something similar to Mega Kangaskhan, where it can attack twice per turn. Who would have thought that out of the lightning zombie, or the boulder trebuchet, that the bat with 2 bananas would end up being the most dangerous. You could say that that's pretty bananas. This is an idea that's been banging around in my brain for quite some time, so big thank you to Neckpunch for joining me as I finally brought it to light. However, what if, instead of crossbreeding, we decided to look into making Pokemon fusions as ancestors instead?
Well, that's what I suggested at the start.
And we did it!
So y'all can check that one out over on my channel. Deadbedspread, thank you so much for having me. It was a blast.
Let us know what crossbreed ideas you have in the comments below. Check the description for all my socials, including Discord and Twitter. I've been DBS, and all the best.